everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Nikki Snowland, and I'm the Vice President of Program Advocacy and Action for the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area. And if you come for it's raining, it's flooding, stormwater, and what we can do about it in our communities, you are in the right place. And if your yard looks anything like mine has over the last several days, you definitely see the need for a program like this. I want to tell you a little bit about the League of Women Voters first. Some of you may be members, some of you probably are not. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, and what that means is that we do advocate for things legislatively, but we never take partisan positions. We never support any candidate or ballot question. We are mainly interested in educating the public about legislative questions and other civic matters. Our membership is open to both men and women, despite our name, and we do have several members who are men. So anyone here who has an interest in learning some more about the League of Women Voters, please check our website, which is lwvlflb.org, or come on back afterwards to the membership table in the corner here. They'll be happy to tell you more about us. You can take a membership form with you if you're interested. I would like to make a couple of announcements before we get started. Please silence your mobile devices right now if you haven't already done so. I would like to acknowledge two people in the audience who have helped us quite a lot in putting together this program. Actually, a lot of people have helped us quite a lot, but two in particular, Mike Rummel, who is sitting right here. Mike is our county board rep for District 12, which includes all or most of Lake Forest, I believe, among other areas. And Mike has assisted us with communicating with stormwater management, and he's also, like his wife Melanie, who will be our moderator, he's very interested in environmental issues, and as he told me, he now knows all about the rainfall figures, so that's good. We'll all know about them very soon. I would also like to acknowledge Sandy Hart, who is also here. And Sandy is the county board rep for District 13, which includes Lake Bluff and a lot of points west. Sandy is also the chair of the Lake County Board. Sandy's a longtime environmental advocate, and in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, she held a program as well that had to do with stormwater, but hers was focused on natural solutions such as plantings that you can use, and we've got two posters in the back there that she has loaned to us. So thank you to both of you. Sorry, one second, I have to wait the computer back up. I think this laptop is about as old as my daughter, so leave us sleep. Okay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Melanie Rummel. Melanie is a longtime member of the League of Women Voters, and she's a very experienced moderator. I'm very pleased to have her, and I think you'll see why. Melanie happens to be a second ward alderman in Lake Forest. She's also on the Public Works Committee. She, in her professional life, she's of counsel with Lesser, Lutry, Pasquazy, and Howe. And she's formerly an adjunct law professor at Loyola. She is a past chair of the Lake Forest Open Lands Association. That organization is represented here. So Melanie is extremely knowledgeable about water issues in particular. We have a climate change interest group, and Melanie often attends those meetings. And when we got on the topic of this event that we were planning, she spoke so knowledgeably about it. I thought we simply have to have her here, so I'm very glad that she's able to. I believe she knows all or most of our presenters today too. So Melanie, thank you for being here, and
well, thank you for the kind introduction, Nikki, and welcome, and thank you for being here. This is a very interesting and important topic for our communities, as you will see from our presenters today. And we are delighted to have such a distinguished panel, and thank you to the League for putting this panel together and contacting all of our presenters, and thank you to each one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to not only do a presentation but to be here with us tonight. So it is, we're starting out with the presentations, and then there will be questions and answers at the end. Do you want me to go through how that will work?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to.
So there will be index cards. Just raise your hand and one of the League members will come with an index card, and I think they probably have pens and pencils too, and submit the questions, and then in the question and answer period I will review them. Don't be disappointed if your question isn't stated verbatim, because some of them are repeat questions or questions asked in a slightly different manner. So the League combines some topics together. So that's how it works, and it will be addressed to our panel members. So that's at the end of the presentation. First we will listen to the various presenters. And we're starting out with Mike Warner. Mike is the Executive Director of the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission. He's a professional engineer and a certified floodplain manager in Illinois, working in surface water planning, engineering, and infrastructure construction. He previously worked for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and DuPage County Stormwater Management. Mike has provided emergency service support during 8 and counting, he says in parentheses, flood-based disaster declarations in Illinois, which is information in and of itself. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me tonight and the introduction. Yeah, it does say 8 and counting disasters, because, you know, after July of 2017, we had one here, but didn't get declared at the national level, so that was a shame. I wanted to also just really quickly go over my handouts that I had in the back. So there's living on the water's edge. There's some advice for homeowners that may be on a creek or lake shore. And Sandy brought this one. I don't know if we have additional ones at the office, but if you want to look at this one is called The Citizen's Guide to Riparian Area Management. So if you're along a stream corridor and you're interested in this, please contact me afterwards and we can see if we can get you a copy. There's also, so I'll talk a little bit about our watershed planning work that we're doing. And we're planning in Lake Michigan and the North Branch right now. Here is a frequently asked questions flyer for the Lake Michigan planning work that we're doing. Just a general watershed, what is a watershed information item. And these are our 2 most popular ones. So this one just came off the printer. I think I have enough for everybody here. This is Rain Gardens, a how-to manual for interested. If you have water areas on your property and you want to figure out a way to deal with them in a kind of an aesthetic and environmentally friendly manner, this is the one go-to guide. And then we also have a citizen's guide to maintaining stormwater practices on your property. All right. So, before I start, I just want to show of hands, how many heard or felt the explosion on Friday night? A lot of us did. So it was a tragic accident, of course, but I do have a question. So why would Stormwater Management Commission get called at 2:30 a.m. to assist in emergency response for that explosion? And don't answer, I will have the answer later in the slides. And just let you think about that a little bit. All right, so I was asked to start global and then drill down to the local level. So that's a really wide lens. I have 20 or so minutes and I'm up for the challenge. But hopefully we're not gonna cover black holes or anything, because then I'll run over my time. But I'm not an expert in climatology, but I understand data, so I'm data oriented. And the fourth National Climate Assessment was a team of 300 scientists and expert advisors that put in their free time, so to speak, to come up with this fourth assessment. And they basically said, they squarely described the ongoing climate trend. So for me, my interpretation of that study is as follows. Warm air holds more water. So have you ever been down south in the southern US in the summer? You know how humid it gets in the summer. Well, that's a kind of a microcosm of what's happening on a global scale. So and I know that they don't have thousands of years of data to support this, but they do have several, I think 200 or 300 years of data to support their conclusion that we are getting warmer. So not only does the air hold more water, but warm air has more energy compared to water boiling, which creates stronger storm events. So on the flip side, why are we getting record cold temperatures? And what the heck is a bomb cyclone? Okay, so that was a new term I learned this year, and I don't know if everybody heard that, but it's basically a hurricane over land. And this is what happens. So this is right in the central US. And as the warm, moist air came up from the Gulf, and it met that frigid air from the north, those two shear planes created this swirling low pressure pattern and basically created a hurricane over land. And you know how we got rain on the south side and snow on the north side? Well, that's part of it, but also it dumps a lot of precipitation out. Okay, we're going to drill down a little bit. That was global. I'm going to go regional now. So it is raining more. The Illinois State Water Survey analyzed a lot of rainfall data, and there is a trend. And I want to emphasize that it's a trend, so it hasn't stopped yet. So they are seeing increase in rainfall, and we're kind of in that upward zone. And these two graphs, I know, are fairly data complex, but essentially what they are is historical rainfall. And on the left, it shows the number of events with precipitation greater than 2 inches. So it's a good size gully washer, good size rain. And you can see over time, and especially recently, in recent history, that number of events is increasing fairly significantly. The next graph is total rainfall per year over time. And they split it into two analysis periods. So you've got about, 1900 to 1950, and then 1950 to now, approximately. And you can see the red trend line, again, is trending up. So their confidence level that heavy precipitation events is going to increase is high. For Lake County specifically, we were using 6.5 inches of rain in 24 hours as our design standard. So for storm sewers, for detention ponds, things that we build around municipalities. Now the State Water Survey is saying that same storm event is 8.57 inches. So it's a 32% increase. And so what does that mean? It means that we need to build larger detention ponds, or we should be building larger detention ponds, larger storm sewers, because we're going to see those rains more frequently. And these graphs don't actually go through, they only go through 2014. So they don't include the last 5 years. And I'll show you something next. So that's 2017. And here's Lake County, right here, in the bottom right corner. And the gray areas right there are 8 to 10 inches of rain. And there's a few spots of 8 to 10 inches, and then the rest of it's about 6 to 8 inches of rain. So that's what happened in July of 17 in Lake County. So that is local. I've never seen so much water. I was out there doing flood response, and it was just like an ocean. You know, I think the term we used back then was biblical, but but there has been larger rain since then in Wisconsin. There was a 14-inch rain in Madison last year, so you can have more water than what we saw. And the night before this happened, you know, it was a wet condition, and I talked to Kurt and Bob in my office. So Kurt's our chief engineer, and Bob is our resident meteorologist, and he kind of fashions himself after a Tom Skilling kind of guy. And so he sends out great information about all this rain. And so I checked with them before I left. I said, well, we got 2 inches of rain predicted. So let's reconvene in the morning. This is about 5 p.m. right when I was leaving, and see what happens overnight. Well, we got the 6 to 10 inches of rain. I was back in the office at 4:30 a.m. and we were opening the emergency operations center, and our building got flooded on the second floor. So the first floor didn't flood. So I'll tell you how that happened. We have a roof garden, but the flashing on the wall wasn't brought up quite high enough. So when the roof garden filled up, it kind of leaked into the building. So that doesn't happen very often, where the second floor floods and the first floor doesn't. But, so, more local. All right, so what happened since 2017? We use the Gurney gauge on the Des Plaines River as kind of a measurement of ground zero. It's kind of centrally located in the county. It gives us a good indication of kind of the feel for all the rain that we're having around the county. And in the past, we knew that when the gauge reached 7 feet, that we'd have to start mobilizing to sandbag the grade school. And so there it was in 2004. You can see this school behind the sandbag levee and the levee all around it. Well, we bought that out, tore it down, made it into a park. So now Gurney is protected, and we bought out a lot of other houses. I'll talk about that later in Gurney. But I think they're protected to almost 8 feet now, so they've got an extra foot of freeboard. But anyway, we still use 7 feet as the flood level. And in 2018, we exceeded flood heights at that location 6 times. That's never happened since I've started working here. So that's the most exceedances of flood stage ever in 1 year, and that was last year. This year, we're at 3 already. So I was, and we were at the, so when this one came, we were downstate in Peoria at the state convention of stormwater managers. And so we're all on our phones, looking at this, and we're talking about it. It's kind of a big geek fest down there, but we're good people. So, more local. So what do we do about it? Well, we make our county, our community, our subdivisions, our homes, and ourselves more resilient. We want to be able to withstand and recover quicker. It's going to happen again. So what do we do? How do we do that? And we adopted, so our office adopted this emergency management criteria is plan, prepare, respond, recover, and mitigate. So it's a thought through process. This is, and it can be applied to all of these. It can be applied to yourself, your house, your community. So we plan. I talked about the watershed planning work that we're doing on Lake Michigan and North Branch. This is where we have this is where we have watershed plans in the county. And we have never had a watershed plan along Lake Michigan. So we're excited about that. We've got a lot of community buy-in. Thank you to Lake Forest and Lake Bluff for participating in that. And we had the kickoff meeting at the Gordon Center. I think many of you have commented that you went to it. I think it was a couple weeks ago or last week. I was not able to go. So there is, it's the watershed planning level is what we use as the basis for water resource management. So it's the basic central unit in our realm of work that we do for the planning exercise. You want to plan at the watershed level because water respects those boundaries. It doesn't respect political boundaries, but if you're over here, and by the way, that's a subcontinental divide, because the Lake Michigan area goes to the Atlantic Ocean, everything else goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. So, but if you're, and it's ironic, you know, Green Bay Road is pretty close to the watershed divide, so if water lands on that, on the east side of it, it's going to Lake Michigan, on the west side, it's going to North Branch. So what do we do in watershed planning? We look at flooding and stormwater problems, we look at water quality issues. It's a holistic approach to water resource management. It includes projects and programs that may be eligible for grant funding or other funding sources. And the most important thing from my perspective is the action plan. And that allows for SMC and all the watershed stakeholders to pursue and implement projects and on a prioritized basis, based on need, cost, and benefit. So I've got a little inset here. It's not that little, but I want to give you an idea of where we are. So these blue lines are watershed divides. There's the Lake Michigan one right there. And then these are North Branch. So there's Skokie River, there's Middle Fork, and there's West Fork. So if you see Lake Forest here, it's almost all in the Lake Michigan or North Branch watershed. There's only a small little piece right there next to Mettawa that's in the Displains. And Lake Bluff is completely contained either in the North Branch or Lake Michigan watersheds. So the two watershed planning efforts that we have going on, we've got you covered, okay? And please participate. Thank you for, if you have already. This plan began in late 2018. It's an update to the 2008 plan. The North Branch watershed has benefited more than any other watershed in the county with regard to grant funding and project implementation. So we have a very robust partnership with all the communities and local governments in the watershed, park districts, etc. This is funded in part by an Illinois EPA Section 319 program. I'm required to say that, so get that one on tape. We have partnerships with also the North Branch Watershed Work Group. And another exciting item on this is it includes Cook County. For one of the first big efforts that we've done with Cook County, and there's several communities down there that are very actively engaged in this. It covers 94 square miles. All right. Lake Michigan watershed base plan. That's a 56 square mile area. Costs about $250,000. That also began last year. It'll conclude in 2020. It's funded in part by an Illinois DNR Coastal Management Grant and an Illinois EPA Section 319 grant. The scope of work will create eligibility for funding under the Clean Water Act, and Lake Michigan is also eligible for the Great Lakes Watershed, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So that's been an important funding source that we've used on ravines all through the county, and a lot of them north of here, and I know that some of the communities have used that source as well. So that's an excellent program. All right, next step on the emergency manager's list is to prepare. And I'll speed up as we're going. I don't want to go over too much on my time. So we create this flood problem area inventory, as I spoke about in the plan. It comes up with a site-specific action plan and concept designs, and we implement. So here's a project we implemented upstream of here on what we call the Jamie mitigation project. It was named after Geraldo Jamie, who donated the property to us, donated the initial parcel to us, and it's expanded and it will continue to expand. But it was identified in previous watershed planning efforts. It's been a phased project approach since 2012. And we're also utilizing public-private partnerships. We have 3 government partners and 4 private. So all of our projects, almost all of them, use a multi-objective approach. So we have wetland restoration and mitigation. I'll talk about that. We have water control structures that we've installed to fine-tune optimal water levels and achieve our project objectives. We keep the water level low during construction and then adjust it later to the desired wetland plant community tolerance. Wet prairie sedge meadow with water level near the ground surface. Too deep and we start to get cattails, which we don't want. So after construction and excavation, we already had a really good pop in spring of 2018, and it's just getting better since then. The floodplain storage excavation. All phases of this project had excavation component to provide additional flood storage. Our stormwater conveyance improvement. The Navy base, so this picture is looking south, and that's the Navy golf course. I think it's called Willow Glen. And they've replaced a pipe through there, and we also are creating an overland flow path in conjunction with ComEd, and that overland flow path in itself will also create more storage. And then the last one is the water quality enhancements. Wetlands and native vegetative areas are effective systems that treat surface water, filter pollutants, hydrocarbons, all adhere to plants, and bacteria breaks it down as a food source. Suspended sediment can also settle out. So our project outcomes, it provides over 5 acres of wetland mitigation. We've done additional excavation and grading. We're ongoing with vegetation management, and more parcels will be added to this in the near future. All right, prepare. Now we're getting really local in my backyard. So I went out to take a picture of my rain garden this morning, but I didn't. I pulled one off the internet instead because the vegetation's not quite it's not great yet. So the only thing that mine has in common is it's got a beach ball of my daughter's that's sitting in the middle of it. So I don't think that's a beach ball, but that's what ours looks like. But so what happens with that, I've got my downspouts connected to it. I've run pipes from the sides of my house around there. And so it floods during a heavy rain, and then it soaks into the ground later, and it doesn't, and I've also got my sump pump piped into there. And so my neighbors I'm on a slope, and the neighbor behind me on the downslope from me doesn't see a drop of my water. I've never seen water run off the back of my yard, so it's working great. And they can be very aesthetic, and they're highly recommended. So they solve a lot of those types of problems. All right, respond. So Melanie covered that I participated in 8 flood disaster responses, and it's been all over the state. I mean, when I worked with IDNR, we did a flood response on the Illinois River. Last week, 2/3 of Illinois was under flood stage. So not just Lake County, but all along the Illinois River, everything along the Mississippi River. It seems like every week, well, it doesn't seem like it, almost every week I'm hearing of other flood records that are occurring around the U.S. So it's not just us, but we do have to pay attention to what we're doing. This is the next step in the emergency manager's criteria. After every large flood, we update this manual. And this one was revised in August 2017 after the July storm. So what did we add to it? Drones. That's right. We've been talking about using a drone because, like on the Jamie property, we could fly it. It takes topography off of a camera and a benchmark that we use on site. So we can check the grading work that's being done by the contractor. So we wanted to use these drones. And we went to the commission, I think on July 6th, and adopted a drone policy, how our pilots should fly them, should be respectful of personal privacy issues. And They approved it, and they approved the purchase of a drone. It was $1,000, so it's not cheap, but it's not super expensive. We bought it on Monday, July 10th, and then Wednesday, we had 8 inches of rain. And so we started using it on Friday. So, and these are the types of pictures that we had from it. We took, it was really useful. It saved us a lot of time. It helped with our mapping, it helped with our flood response. The state people were impressed, FEMA was impressed. So, 4 more minutes, thank you. So, and Scott actually was working for SEC at the time, and he was one of our drone pilots. Also, the answer to the first question, SMC provides storm sewer, river, and stream network information for spills. So they call it because the fire suppression water was leaking off of the explosion site. They wanted to know where that water was going to go. We provided them that mapping, and then US EPA had a crew out there vacuuming it up and cleaning it up as we spoke to them. All right. I don't have time to run this video, but we do have a video on this homeowners floodproofing workshop that we ran in October of 2017. So if you have time and you're interested, you can look that up on YouTube. So how else do we mitigate? We do a lot of buyouts. I talked about the Gurney Grade School. We purchased over 200 houses. We purchased one in Lake Forest. There's many more to come. And we also put in new infrastructure, storage, reservoirs, and detention ponds and conveyance. Here's an example. So this is just up the watershed from you folks on Lake Michigan. It's in Bull Creek. But these are very similar soils that you have down here in Lake Forest. I know that you've had some slope failures. I know you've had some slope failures both on the beach and on the Ravine Road that have been problematic, and that's what's happening here. If you stand on that deck and look down, you're looking at the water. I asked our project manager on this. We have a grant application in for it right now, and I asked her if anybody was, I thought the people had moved out. She said, no, they're still living there. But a structural engineer has deemed this house imminent with regard to a landslide. And so that's the grant we're applying for, is a FEMA landslide grant. We'll also be doing stream restoration here and slope repair. How much stream restoration is needed? In our Des Plaines plan, we came up with 16 stream miles of most severely eroded at about a price tag of about $25 million. In our current budget, we do infrastructure, our infrastructure funding sources are listed. Typically those are small program levels, and then for the larger projects we go after grants, like Great Lakes Restoration Initiative or IEPA grants. That's it. Thank you.
Mike, I have a couple things I wanted to mention. As Melanie said, if you have questions, please just raise your hand and one of our card runners will bring you an index card to write it on. When you're ready for it to be picked up, raise your hand again and they'll pick it up. Then we'll have card sorters who will bring them up at the end, and Melanie will ask the questions to the panelists. Because there is a lot of overlap in their knowledge, any of them can assist in answering questions. I also want to mention, I think Mike alluded to the fact that there are a lot of handouts and stuff in the back. When we're finished here, please do go back there and see what's available. There's some great material back there. And one other thing I want to mention that I forgot to say before was that we have a feedback survey this year, throughout the year for our events. We've been trying to get people's feedback, just find out how effective they feel that our events have been, if you like the speakers, if you like the venue, and so on. So we would really like your honest opinions. They're anonymous surveys, and they're at our membership table back there. Thank you, and I'm just going to switch over here to the next presentation.
It's my pleasure to introduce Mike Thomas. Mike Thomas has been with the City of Lake Forest. He's been our Director of Public Works since May of 2011 and an employee of the city since September of 1994. Prior to the director position, Mike was superintendent of public works, working with both operations and multiple capital improvement projects. Michael has overall responsibility for the 7 operating sections within the Department of Public Works. Those sections are streets, sanitation, water and sewer, water plant, engineering, fleet maintenance, and building maintenance. So we get our money's worth out of Mike.
Thank you, Alderman Rummel. If we want to talk snow or garbage, we can talk about that as well. I'm happy to talk about that too. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and Alderman Rummel for putting all this together. I think any opportunity we have to get the message out is wonderful, because it's not only something that the city is dealing with, but we want to show different ways that homeowners can address some of these things as well. So we'll start off, I will review historical rainfall data in Lake Forest, talk about storm classifications, the watersheds that Mike referenced, storm sewer system in Lake Forest, a list of projects past and future, the stormwater management policy that we have, and then we have a handful of brochures at the end. So I'd like to start this out just to give context, and I think many of us have experienced this in our own properties, but just to give an idea of the phone calls that I receive and a lot of us in Public Works receive. This was after one of many heavy rainfalls, a lot of rain in a short period of time. Water that is obviously going around the yard, swales on the side yard. But we get a lot of phone calls from residents saying, my gosh, my yard is flooding. So the unique aspect of this is that that's my yard. I live 2 blocks south of Cherokee School in Lake Forest, and it's my responsibility to fix it. It isn't the city's. If I perceive that to be a problem, which I don't, because within a couple of hours, the water is gone. But it's not the taxpayer's responsibility, it's mine. So some historical rainfall data. We looked at the past 10 years data of rainfall per month. And if you look at, let's say June and July, we look at the past 10 Junes, the past 10 Julys, we're about 3.5, 3.6 inches of rain that we would receive in that month. There is 2017. If you look at the same months, June 7.05, July 7.85. Whole lot of rain, short period of time. Now, the next line is 2018. Again, look at the same months. You are down to 1.12 last June and 0.63 in July. So from an engineering standpoint, you sit back and say, how do you build an infrastructure for that? It's like, hey, are we supposed to build a parking lot for Christmas Eve? Well, that's the challenge. So we have storm classifications, and all the panel is well versed on this. I hate telling residents that it's another 100-year storm, because the residents turn back and say, you keep telling us that, for God's sakes. It can't be another 100-year storm. These are rates. So it doesn't mean that the storm is only going to happen once every 100 years. That's not it. If we receive 1.31 inches of rain in a one hour period, that's a 2-year storm. If we receive 1.84 inches in a 1 hour period, we call that a 10-year storm. We receive 2.82 in 1 hour, that's a 100-year storm. Here's the challenge. Our municipal storm sewer system and most storm sewer systems in the US are designed at a 10-year rate. Not at a 25, not at a 50, not at 100. 10-year. So then people come back and say, well, then put one in. Put one in that's gonna handle this stuff. So if we were to go to a 50-year and take all the storm sewers in Lake Forest, replace them, it would cost about $83,000 per homeowner. If we want to design one and build it for a 100-year, the estimate that our engineer put together is about $95,000 per homeowner. We're obviously not going to do that. So we've got to come up with creative things, not only to manage the water from the public sector, but also help homeowners accept, like I do, that, yeah, the backyard is full of water, and in a couple of hours, backyard dries up. So as Mike mentioned, these are watersheds within Lake Forest. The purple one on the far east side essentially is Green Bay East. When you get down to Whispering Oaks near Old Elm, it changes a little bit. But all that stormwater in our storm sewers goes into the ravines, which are private, which then go into Lake Michigan. The red area, I always call it the East Skokie drainage ditch. The red area, which essentially is Green Bay Road, and we'll take it west to about Westmoreland, maybe a little bit further west of the King Muir subdivision, and bring it south all the way down to Old Elm. All of the storm water, all of our storm drains drain to that ditch. Go further west. Internally, we call it the West Skokie ditch in the blue area, and that's approximately Waukegan Road, King Muir, but everything west. That goes into, again, our storm sewer pipes go into that drainage ditch, and in the far southwest part of town, West Fork, Hackberry, that area, all of that storm water actually goes under 94 over into Lincolnshire. So, here's the problem. Those watersheds are north of us and they're south of us. And there are other communities, north and south of us, putting their storm water into the same watershed. So, the problem becomes this. That is over near our public safety building on Deer Path. And if you can see in that red box there, that's one of our storm sewer pipes. When we receive a heavy amount of rain in a short period of time, if the ground is saturated as well, that creek obviously builds up. And once it gets over the top of that pipe, as one of the guys I used to work with, he would say, "Church is over. We're done. There's not a thing we can do." So streets will flood. And we have various streets in town, and we had it last Labor Day, where those storm sewers filled up, those ditches were overflowing, and until those ditches would go down, our storm sewers aren't going to drain. So again, it's trying our best to educate the public like we are right now to say, this is how the system works. The system has limitations. We can do some things, but you as a homeowner have really got to work at trying to protect your property, protect your basements. So our storm sewer system, we have 8 full-time guys in our water and sewer section, but you can see on the screen, they've got a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of infrastructure that they are responsible for maintaining. 219 miles of storm sewer, 139 miles of sanitary, 168 miles of water main, about 3,400 storm manholes, 1,400 hydrants, about 4,600 catch basins, which are the road drains, about 1,600 inlets, and 3,600 manholes. So those 8 guys are plowing your streets as well. They're fixing main breaks, but that's what we have. That is what the budget allows. So in addition to that, we've had storm sewer studies. We have worked with an engineering firm out in Crystal Lake, Baxter and Woodman, that did a study for us in 1991. We had one in 2002 and again in 2014, where they basically model our town. They've got all of our rainfall data. They know where we had problem areas, and they then develop a list of projects for us to embark on. So this is a list from 1993 up to our current project that's going to begin here in about a month. But you can see it's about $14.5 million that the city has spent on storm sewers. The challenge moving forward, and this is a list from the 2014 storm sewer study. This is a list of projects that we have that we want to pursue. The challenge is we have about $4.2 million a year in capital, and that is for roads, bridges, storm sewers, 34 buildings, 250 pieces of equipment, fire engines. It all comes out of the same checkbook. So if people are upset about the stormwater, and they're upset about the roads too, and the fire chief says, I've got a truck that's 25 years old, blah, 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 blah. The aldermen have a big challenge, and they do a very good job of saying, we've got to balance everything. We just can't throw all the money into one bucket. We've got to spread it out. So they give us buckets essentially and say, okay, we're going to do $1 million worth of roads. We'll put 250 towards storm sewers. We'll do 400 towards equipment. But that is the big challenge the aldermen have. And they do a very good job because that's a lot that the city owns. It's a lot that you as homeowners, we together, own as infrastructure, and we just can't walk away from one of them. We can't walk away from buildings and say, forget the rec center, we'll get to it later. The project we have coming up for this year, Old Elm in Timber, thank you to Alderman Rummel. We actually planned our storm sewer projects every third year. Every third year, paving, the asphalt work that's done on the streets is paid for through MFT funds, motor fuel tax. So that $1 million that we typically put towards that becomes free, and we usually do a storm sewer project. Residents in this area were having some significant problems and issues. Came to our city council and asked if there was any way this project that was scheduled for next summer, if it could be moved up. And Alderman Rummel and Alderman Newman in the 2nd Ward worked with the city council and were able to put some new fees and bring some new revenues in. What it essentially will entail is taking Old Elm, if you can picture Old Elm in Green Bay, that first block east between Timber has a 27-inch storm sewer. We're going to upsize that to a 54. And then the stretch on Timber between Forest Hill and Old Elm has a 24. We're going to bring that up to a 42. Essentially, that's going to give a good amount of capacity, and it's going to, we believe, and our engineers and all the models have shown, alleviate the flooding. While we are at it, we're going to install a new water main on Forest Hill to get that whole thing done, and then we can leave that area. I mention this because Old Elm is going to be closed for a couple months, and we've got our contractor on board. We actually have a pre-construction meeting with them on Monday, but we're going to start as soon as school is out, and we want to be done when school is back in session. But Old Elm is going to be closed, which is really going to mess up traffic in Lake Forest. So we will continue to work at getting that word out. The City of Lake Forest adopted a stormwater management policy. We adopted that back in March of 2016, and the Public Works Committee recently worked at making modifications and some updates to include ravines. That policy then was brought back to our City Council, updated in February of 19. But the policy specifically reviews both private and public responsibilities. It also provides a process for, we call it private consultations. We'll bring our guys out from engineering, our guys out from water sewer, and visit you at home and show you different ways that you can improve your property before you meet with contractors. There's no charge, but our guys see this stuff a lot. So when they show up at a house, they can very quickly look at it and say, we can tell the water is coming from here, it's going here, we suggest you do A, B, and C. Here's a handful of companies, here's a couple engineering firms. But as we go through it, the Illinois drainage laws discussed, funding, public education. We obviously are number one concerned about sanitary in residents' basements, and the policy addresses that. Last slide, brochures, literature that are available. Thank you to Mike. We actually use a lot from Lake County Stormwater Management, and then we have our own policy and information on ravines and that type of thing. So,
All in the back.
all in the back, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
It's my pleasure to introduce Scott Griffiths. Thank you, Scott, for pinch hitting tonight. He's filling in for, who was the representative from Lake Bluff who was supposed to be with us. Scott is a senior water resources engineer with Christopher B. Burke Engineering Limited. He's worked with them for 11 years. Previously, he was with the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission for 3 years. Scott has been involved with drainage improvement projects within the village of Lake Bluff since 2014, so he's certainly very knowledgeable on what's going on in Lake Bluff. Again, thank you, Scott.
Good evening. Thanks for having me out tonight. I love talking about drainage, so I'm just glad to be able to share a project that I've been involved in for the last 5 years. So, you know, it says past, but my past only goes to about 2014. If you're familiar with George Russell, the former engineer of Lake Bluff, only he really knows the real past of drainage of Lake Bluff. So he's very familiar and is still a valuable resource to us. So what I want to talk about today, 4 things. I want to talk about kind of existing drainage patterns that the village has. Both Mike and Michael have talked about it earlier on how the village is kind of divided. Previous studies that the village has been involved in. Future construction projects. So if you live in the area and you see some projects going on, these are a couple that I'm going to talk about tonight. And then the current village-wide drainage study that the village is very active in right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is the village stormwater drainage patterns. And as those before me have said, Green Bay Road is pretty much the divide between the Skokie River to the west and Lake Michigan to the east. I'm not sure if you can see, the yellow lines are kind of just a brief overview of what the existing storm sewer system looks like within the village. That this is currently the area that is within the study limits that the village-wide study is taken care of, but I will touch more on that. When water falls, it's conveyed via 2 ways, overland or through storm sewers. A lot of the storm sewers within Lake Bluff are very old and outdated. They don't meet current standards. So what we tend to see is a lot of overland flow, ponding in low-lying areas within backyards, roadside ditches. And the further you go to the east, there's actually 2 additional systems that come in. So here's kind of a more detailed look at the drainage divides within Lake Bluff. You can see Green Bay Road is the far left, red line to the west. Sheridan Road kind of goes down the middle, and then to the east you have 3 individual subbasins, all 3 that drain out to various ravines within the village. So it gives you an idea that if you are located west of Sheridan Road, all of your drainage and stormwater runoff is going to pass through the well-known viaduct, which tends to close frequently during these high rainfall events, before draining out and heading east towards Artesian Park and the ravine that discharges out to the lake. So, previous studies that the village has actually undertaken, one of the main ones that kind of spurred additional studies and additional detail of the area, or some of the construction projects that are occurring, was the Scranton Avenue Viaduct Drainage Study. So this is commonly known as the Viaduct Study. Completed in January of 2015. We actually started this back in 2014 after one of the major rainfall events that the village saw. And over time, it's actually been a huge asset, because from that study, we were able to identify some smaller problem areas that that we're able to fix now and not have to wait, where you look at the viaduct and it's a very large scale project, but you look at some of these smaller pocket areas within the village and we're able to kind of pinpoint these and say, well, okay, what can we do to improve these areas? So this is a picture, if you're familiar with the area. This is the bike path that actually goes over the viaduct. Here is, I don't really think this was that bad of a rain event, but kind of a common sight. The viaduct is closed. Several inches of water ponding on the road. So onto the future construction projects that I kind of discussed earlier, which were a result of the viaduct study. Two projects that are actually up and coming, Lincoln Avenue drainage improvements. Lincoln Avenue in the North Terrace is actually going to have a new storm sewer put in within a low-lying area. The area actually tends to flood frequently during these high rainfall events. We're going to increase some of the capacity and move water down towards the bike path and the ditch that flows towards the viaduct at a better rate, and it actually decreases the frequency of flooding in that area. West Sheridan Place drainage improvements. This is actually in the East Terrace, if you're familiar with that area. East Terrace kind of goes up and down. The roads are kind of hilly. There's some low-lying areas that tend to pond, and when the capacity of that storm sewer occurs, you start seeing overland flood through various residential backyards, ponding in backyards. So this storm sewer is hopefully going to be able to address a lot of those issues that we see currently. And then what else this has spurred is more alternatives to identify as part of the viaduct. We've looked at, so far in the past, as part of the 2015 study, we looked at various storage and conveyance improvement options for the area. What can we do with the land that surrounds there, and who owns the land, and what can we do to get water moving from there towards the lake at a higher rate, but not cause downstream impacts that will damage some of the ravines that are always seemingly facing high runoff rates. This is going to be we've also actually engaged with IDOT as part of this too, to see what can be done to improve the maintenance and how we can try and keep the 100-year-old drain tiles still functioning as best we can. This is going to be kind of an ongoing project. More alternatives will probably be identified as part of the village-wide study, because the benefit of looking at a village-wide study is you're actually able to model one area and see what's occurring downstream or in a different part of the area. Because the last thing you really want to do is say, okay, well, we fixed the problem at the viaduct, but now 400 houses flood on the east side of town because we just moved the water over there. What we're doing as part of a village-wide study is we're actually able to look at it and say, okay, is this project feasible based on the fact that we are now increasing water leaving that area, but with where it's going, are we impacting additional properties? Are we causing more damage downstream? What are the implications of kind of moving the water around the village at a higher rate? So one project that I just talked about earlier, Lincoln Avenue drainage improvement, I don't know how well you can see it. The red line is the old existing storm sewer that used to drain the low-lying area, which is actually in the top left corner. It used to drain through several backyards before picking up another storm sewer on Rockland Avenue and heading south. You can see the ditch kind of under that circle. There's Illinois Route 176. What we're proposing to do is the yellow line, if you can see it on the kind of the left third of the page, right down Lincoln Avenue, we are going to put in some high capacity inlets or additional inlets to pick up some of the runoff that drains to that low-lying area and run a pipe underneath 176 directly into that same ditch that the water goes to now. So really we're just trying to move water away from backyards, trying to reduce any sort of impact to additional or existing structures, and into an existing ditch that's been there for years. West Sheridan, this I kind of touched on briefly. Sheridan Place, Park Avenue, Lincoln Avenue. Very hilly, I guess you could say, up and down terrain. Some low-lying areas that we're looking to try and drain as best we can to avoid the impact of several of the homes that are in the area. What we're looking to do is replace the storm sewer down 3 of those roads and discharge it out over towards, actually tie into an existing storm sewer, so we're not actually increasing flows into the railroad right-of-way, which is where the existing storm sewer drains to. So now what I kind of wanted to hit on is what's currently going on is the village-wide drainage study. Our goal for the study is really to identify problems within our study area. And that study area is kind of what I showed earlier, is that red outlined area with the 3 subbasins. Those are our 3 main focus areas. And what we want to do with that is kind of prioritize them, similar to how Lake Forest has, based on, okay, what kind of level of protection are we going to get? What's it going to cost? What are the benefits that we're going to see from these various projects? So I wanted to touch on what's been completed up to this point. This started the middle of last year, where we're at right now and what we're working on, and then what we're going to do moving forward with it. So what we've done so far is, one, if you are a resident of Lake Bluff, you probably either, and are on the mailing list, you either got a link to a survey online to fill out and report any sort of problems that you may have had or you constantly occur. I believe we sent out mailers also to all the residents to go to the website. I was the guy on the other side of the survey reading those results, so thank you if you filled them out. We appreciate it. Everything that was sent to us was a great help. We also had field crews out, so if you saw a couple guys wandering around your yards, we were trying to just kind of identify some storm sewers, some existing storm sewers, to get a better detailed idea of what the actual existing storm sewer is. We have some atlases that were put together over time. They give us size, but some of those sizes are a little off, but we definitely don't have what elevation or inverts or what these pipes are actually sitting at now. And then what we were able to do is take all of that data and build kind of a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis. And we're able to kind of look and see, okay, how does this storm system feature or function during these larger rain events? What Mike kind of pointed out, our 1-year event, our 2-year event, our 24, or our 100-year event. We're really just trying to get a better understanding of where are we going to see problems consistently, and where are we hearing reports from, from residents when they reach out and say, hey, the street's flooding again, what can we do? So our flood questionnaire results, 330 individual responses, variety of questions on the surveys vary from, does your house deal with sewer backup? Do you have overland flow that enters your house through a window well, over land, through your front door, through your garage? Just various questions. Do you have a sump pump? Do you have an ejector pit? We really want to get an idea on what the houses are seeing that are reporting some of these damages. So the map behind it kind of looks like a variety of Kentucky Derby silks and the measles, I guess you could say, right? So each one of those colors and patterns actually is if I had the legend up, you can see each one of those actually refers to a type of reported impact, whether it be, yes, we got sanitary in our basement, we have waterland that overland flows into our house, we have ponding in our backyard that doesn't do anything, but it's back there and it's a nuisance. So these are kind of results that we get. Well, what we were able to do is kind of read them based on what our results look like. So I had mentioned earlier, said, okay, well, we built this large model of the whole village and say, okay, where are we seeing these problems? All of the red spots are where we were kind of seeing these problems. Okay, this is common when you're looking at a storm sewer system that's very, very old, very outdated. It's not sized to meet current standards, definitely not sized to meet current rainfall data. So we were able to kind of identify and say, okay, yeah, this looks familiar. We're used to hearing problems here, but this is kind of, we sat down with the village and we were kind of able to point and say, okay, yes, we're familiar with this, but we haven't heard of this. So, let's take a further look, or let's see what's going on. And then what we were able to do is we were actually able to drop the two maps on top of each other and say, okay, well, what are the residents saying that's going on in these yards? Okay, so we were able to take our results from our analysis, put them up against where these houses are reporting the problems, and to be honest, it actually turned out really close to what they were actually reporting. So you can see the areas, west of Green Bay Road, a lot of those homes are reporting overland flooding. We're well aware of that. We are getting the same results in the modeling because of an outdated storm sewer system. We know that overland flow path exists through backyards, so those results were what we were expecting. On the east part of town, there's several low-lying areas where we knew residents were having problems with street flooding. Nothing really hit the structure, so we weren't really sure if we were going to hear back a response or not. But we were able to look at it and say, okay, yeah, they reported street flooding in these areas. That's good. That's what we're expecting to see. So what's nice about that is we were able to kind of just check how things have been going so far. In addition to that, we also ran the July 2017 event, which was very fresh in everybody's mind. We were able to kind of take a closer look to see how those results compared to what the village was able to see, what the village reported, because that one was a pretty decent rainfall event that we saw. Of course, yes. Our current status: we are identifying potential drainage improvement projects. We are analyzing at a conceptual level, just trying to get an idea on where things are going and what improvements we can do. Our priority is obviously East Terrace neighborhood, based on the overland flooding that constantly occurs, and our underpass. And then what we're going to do with these, we're going to develop cost estimates to help rank the projects, which in the future will then be used to develop kind of a ranking and a priority list. So Ideally, we'd love to develop some conveyance improvement projects, opportunities for green infrastructure if we're able to. And then while we do these projects, we always try and meet with the village minimum standards of keeping the 10-year rainflow off the roads and keeping structures free from the 100-year rainfall events. So at the end of this whole study, we'll be presenting to the Village of Lake Bluff Board to give them an idea and an update on where things are at. So quick summary, the village is very active, been active for as long as I can remember. There's several projects that are actually shovel ready and getting ready to go on the ground, and we're currently working on a larger scale study that will hopefully identify additional improvements in the future.
Thank you. While we're getting the next slides up, I'll go ahead and introduce Ryan London. Ryan serves as Director of Preservation Programs for Lake Forest Open Lands Association. Ryan's work focuses on engaging with private landowners to preserve and enhance the natural values and function, as well as Lake Forest Open Lands ravine outreach efforts. Ryan is a lifelong resident of the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff community, and I think he grew up being at Open Lands practically. He also is on the Lake Forest Collaborative for Environmental Leadership, which is a committee that advises the Lake Forest City Council and staff on environmental matters. And so thank you, Ryan, for being here tonight, and you're up.
Good evening. I am going to rely on my script because otherwise, if you've seen me speak before, I'm going to go way past my 10-minute mark. This is a slide. This is a picture of our healthy, vegetated, restored stream bed in McCormick Ravine. And by now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that project. If you haven't, please see me afterwards. That talk usually takes about an hour and a half. Out on the table in the back, I've got probably the most important thing will be my card. Feel free to reach out to me. We have some general information about Lake Forest Open Lands, our latest newsletter, as well as a flyer about our upcoming plant sale. So as we look at water and ravines and the challenges we face, project examples like McCormick and other nature-based solutions that I'll briefly mention tonight demonstrate how the results of our community's efforts as a whole can not only push but help define Lake Forest as a conservation community. And as far as Lake Forest Open Lands is concerned, we continue to believe that future conservation successes will be driven by grassroots efforts and endeavors like tonight's meeting. We appreciate being invited to be a part of this. And this has always been the formula for success, and we again, we truly appreciate being here. Though many of us love the lake on days like this, we all know too well, especially last year, that what Lake Michigan can do on days like this. And we all depend on a healthy Lake Michigan for our healthy quality of lives. And those of you that enjoyed the Great Lakes Great Issues lecture seminar, stay tuned. We'll be developing a second component of that in the near future. So Lake Forest Open Lands has always had water on our mind, and over our first 50 years, we accomplished a lot that not only enhances the quality of life that we live, but our preservation work has helped our community's stormwater infrastructure function. So this is going to be a map of our preserves, and you'll notice you can kind of line up in your mind some of those watershed maps. Most of them are long watersheds, and so we've done several projects with Lake County SMC over the past 20 years where we're actually deconstruct the banks on the creeks and allow our preserves to serve as stormwater surge retention. Because like Mike said, once the creeks are full, there's no place for those pipes to discharge into. And so that's one of the functions, one of the passive functions of our nature preserves. You know, in addition to all the other benefits that we know about. So again, hopefully each of you will be able to pick out your watershed by the end of the night. We've got the West Fork down the bottom, Middle Fork in the middle, the East Fork for the North Branch, and then Lake Michigan. Now this is a SMC slide that's a little bit older because there's nothing going on for Lake Michigan. Excitingly, we have Lake Michigan watershed plan in the works. So Illinois was blessed with 8.2 million acres of wetlands. It was once considered the duck capital of the world. In Lake Forest, these are historical wetlands, and this is what we have left. Well, because they weren't really seen as valuable, the first thing that they did was drain them. And I could do a whole other lecture on the damages of getting this water off the land into the Mississippi River, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It all relates to that. And so often the first thing we'll do when we get a property is we'll go and find all those tiles, remove them or break them up so that the water stays on the land. The idea is to get, just like Mike was talking about around your home, and I'll talk about that a little bit, we want to try and hold that water on the land. That's the best thing we can do. We're all in this together. So this is what our wetlands are currently in Lake Forest. And again, you can kind of see how they line up with those watersheds. I'll briefly talk about the Lake Michigan watershed because I'm the ravine guy. So keep in mind that all of our 4 watersheds in town did originally drain into the Lake Michigan watershed. Historically, it was almost 673 square miles, and it drained into the Lake Michigan via Chicago and Calumet, and as well as the Coastal Bluff little micro watersheds. But by 1922, those canals had diverted the majority of the flow into the Chicago and Calumet, which was reversed, and the displays. And this was done to provide safe drinking water as well as alleviate flooding and allow cargo traffic. But today, that watershed in total is only 88 square miles, 12% of pre-European settlement. And I have 50 acres in Lake County. Did your extra 6 include Cook County a little bit? So, okay, so that stands. With ravines covering just about 1.6 square miles. So this means that we really need to keep all the water that makes it into Lake Michigan, which we all appreciate, for our drinking water as clean as possible. Our region is subject to temperature extremes, periodic drought, heavy precipitation events, and despite having to endure all Mother Nature's climatological extremes, several of the places that we've saved as an organization are recognized by Illinois Nature Reserve sites and have real significance in the state and beyond. A couple of them are globally significant. So just real quickly, Middle Fork, globally rare tallgrass savanna in the Middle Fork watershed, Shaw Prairie, an original prairie that the plow never hit, that's in the East Fork of the North Branch. And then finally, our first preserve in the Lake Michigan watershed, McCormick Ravine, our newest acquisition, and arguably the finest remnant ravine in Northeast Illinois. And so with McCormick, we'll truly have a preserve for all residents within 5 minutes of their front door. So this translates to our view that our historic natural landscapes, which are central to both our sense of place and our overall health, also contribute to the strength of our community's infrastructure and our ability to facilitate stormwater in a manner that's resilient. One of our goals as an organization is to help residents of our community understand how to best steward water around the home. And again, this could be a whole afternoon workshop, but at our conservation campus, I invite you to stop by anytime. We have all the stormwater from that whole site and all the buildings is facilitated through natural wetlands, rain gardens, and then captured on the site. It doesn't go through any storm sewer systems. And we're happy to give tours. For those of you that have older historic homes, it's kind of neat to see native landscaping used in the historical setting that can complement some of the architecture, and we've all the plants labeled over there. So feel free to stop by. Our plant sale is actually there on the 18th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's a partnership with the City of Lake Forest. Plants are sold pretty much at wholesale cost at an extreme discount. This really helps you get those native species into your property. So if you're interested in doing rain gardens, consultation on invasive species removal, natural landscape buffers, which is like a really easy, minimal thing to do to just try and do a little strip of native around your lawn to help capture some of that. The top one and the right one are actually my yard. That one on the right is It's actually a rain garden. I took 3 inches of soil out from 2 1,000 square foot areas, and it holds quite a bit of water. And then the top picture was a buckthorn thicket that we restored, and we have over 60 different species growing there. That bottom left picture is one of our properties with a conservation easement out at Deer Path Farm. So, yeah, there's other ways to enhance your property in a resilient manner. We strive to work together with our private property owners, and you know, like I said, we're all in this together. If we all do a little bit, we actually have a much larger capacity than what our nature preserves can do as a whole. So that's all I have.
We ran a little bit over with our presentation, so, but we will get to questions. Do we have some questions? Well, while we're waiting for one, I will start out. What can we expect in terms of any state assistance or coming out of the Capitol bill? I noticed a press release today from Lake County that was talking about a recent meeting about the funding bill down in Springfield. Can one of our panelists speak to that? If not, we may have somebody in the audience who can.
I think Drew might have left.
Gentlemen,
Oh,
please
yes.
turn your mics on, and don't forget you need to speak close to them.
I can you hear me? Is that working?
It's for the recording.
Okay. So Drew Urban was here. He was the village manager he is the village manager for Lake Bluff. And I gotta say is that the village president of Lake Bluff had some really excellent comments that she made about stormwater infrastructure in the village of Lake Bluff that they're seeking funding for. So one of them was the pipe, I think that Scott was talking about, that ran out to Lake Michigan. I think it was built in 1905. So that might need to be replaced. You know, it is failing. So I know the village is on their own path with regard to that ask. The Stormwater Commission also made a capital fund ask. It included some buyouts. So those buyouts are all over the county. Like I said, we have bought out a house in Lake Forest. We are looking at buying some more out in Highland Park that are very close to the river that basically flood every time it rains. And so that program is very robust. Like I said, we bought out over 200 homes. And I think the other project that would affect this area is some flood mitigation reservoir in the Park City area to address their flooding. But like I said on our project goals, we always include a flood storage component. So any storage in the North Branch and the Skokie River will provide benefit for everybody along those watersheds. We did not have a specific ask in our budget for the Lake Michigan watershed.
Thank you. We have two questions about the impact of Foxconn, and I think that to be specific, it's does Foxconn's expansion of impervious surfaces and insufficient mitigation of wetlands have an impact on our Chicago River watershed, or only the Des Plaines, which is mostly outside of Lake Forest? I think, Mike, that's probably a question once again for you.
Sure. Foxconn definitely has an impact on the Des Plaines River watershed. It does not affect the North Branch, but that development did open our eyes to other development that's occurring in the Wisconsin portion of the Des Plaines. So really it represents a small component of all of the development that could occur upstream. But that coupled with the rainfall events, we're looking at ordinance changes to address those in the form of building protection elevations. So very similar if you've ever been along the Florida coast, how 20, 30 years ago, those homes were on the beach, and now most of them are 8 feet high with the garages underneath them so that the structures are not damaged. We don't have to go 8 feet high, but we will be elevating our protection levels.
Interesting. All right, this is a question for Mike Thomas. Mike, I did not submit this question. You'll understand when I ask it. With all of the necessary salt that was used this winter, which I would guess all drains into the storm sewers and ultimately to Lake Michigan, does this have any effect that should be of concern to our environment?
The quick answer to that is yes. The salt flat out does not go away. So it is a constant challenge between residents wanting streets that are very drivable, that are clear. There are other products. Alderman Rummel worked with us and suggested a product called beet juice that we started using last year. But the challenge is meeting the expectations of residents. We also have a budgetary constraint. The salt is about $63 a ton. But from an environmental standpoint, yes, that is something that we are also aware of and concerned with. Each town is allowed to apply whatever application rate they want. So when we hear, gosh, Waukegan and Highwood, it's running water. Oh, they put 800 pounds of salt per lane mile down. We put 300. That's how this whole thing works. IDOT has a different rate. Lake County DOT may have a different rate. But they're doing it in response to what the residents are looking for. So yes, ultimately it does. And we are working, we've actually adopted a policy where December 1st to January 15th, we will salt everything. Around January 15th through the end of February, we will salt the main roads, Green Bay, Western McKinley, the hills, curves, and intersections of the side streets. The regular basic side street, we won't salt. Now, we'll get pushback. Residents will get upset and say, come on, your streets are not in good shape. Well, we're making an obvious choice from an environmental standpoint, as well as a cost, to try and pull back on the salt usage.
Here's another question that I think can be taken by both Mike and Ryan. It has to do with detention ponds that are maintained by homeowners associations. How do we determine whether the width and depth and volume capacity will be adequate for the future, and how do we improve it? And I'm going to tack on to that, should we be building more wetlands or more detention ponds?
Okay, it's quite a varied answer or a request there. I would say that the detention ponds, when we've analyzed the Illinois State Water Survey rainfall, the 6.5 inches of rain that I mentioned earlier equates to a 25-year level of protection within the detention pond. So it doesn't hold what was intended to hold, the 100-year flow, but as Mike had mentioned, the city storm sewers are only designed typically for a 10-year storm. So the fact that they're smaller than what we thought they were going to contain isn't necessarily a problem, but the overland flow path, so once those ponds do overflow, which they will, and we have seen, the overland flow paths from those ponds to points downstream has to be looked at a little bit closer to make sure that there isn't homes or other damage that can occur from that overland flow. So whether we should build more detention ponds or wetlands, my answer to that would be both. I believe that wetland mitigation is one of the lacking components of the development process that's occurring upstream from us in Wisconsin. But we're very serious and robust about wetland impacts that happen in Lake County. So we are mitigating for those impacts here. They're very valuable, my project example that I gave earlier was recreating 5 acres of wetlands. And I know, Ryan, that you've done similar things on your properties as well.
I'll just add that, it's very site-specific, and I could sit here and tell you, I want to see more wetlands, but I think Lake Forest Open Lands certainly has a luxury with the amount of acreage that we have to work with for our hydrological projects, and so we, of course, prefer wetlands, but I realize, each development is different. I think Mike made a really good point earlier in the evening about the depth of the water and management of cattails. We tend to see fewer of the cattails in the sites that have that lower water level. Deer Path Farm across from Granger on Route 60 was one where we did have more cattails, and part of our maintenance project is we have to go in there every couple of years and manage them. So we do have a pretty tight, well-respected network of contractors that we work with for that kind of stuff. So if any of you are in an HOA and you're looking to get some best management practices for your retention ponds, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. How are our native trees and other vegetation holding up with this greater rainfall? Is it impacting our plantings and native trees? Ryan again.
So our native species have evolved with the ebbs and flows of our climate here. We actually have, believe it or not, one of the more, and Mike can agree with this as well. I get the emails from Bob and they're fantastic. I recommend signing up for them. It's a pretty exciting climate here, and most of our species have adapted to be able to handle it. However, we are under constant threat with invasive species. And we're seeing one of our heritage pinnacle species, our climax species with the bur oak, start to have trouble with some of these climate change issues, in particular with a type of fungus, a Tabacia fungus, that spreads what we call bur oak blight. And we are seeing this even on our sites, especially the ones that hold a lot of water. And it's a pretty scary thing because one bur oak can support 534 different species of birds and insects. So we are starting to see at least the bur oaks being affected.
Did it play a role in the emerald ash borer at all?
Climate change or stormwater?
Right.
Not that I'm aware
Or
of.
climate change?
Not that I'm aware
No,
of. That was just a vector one.
Just the blight that we had to endure.
But invasive species, there's threats, there's an invasive species in Africa, Uganda, I think it's Uganda 94. I mean, they can't grow wheat over there. So it doesn't just affect our habitats, it could affect our food production too.
The next question is, how beneficial are porous driveways used by homeowners? And if they are there good materials available for homeowners for porous driveways and hardscaping? What's been the experience? What's the state of the art on that? Mike Warner?
I can give a couple examples. There's porous pavement at the Ryerson Conservation Area in the parking lot there, and I believe that the Forest Preserve is using that as kind of a test pavement area, if you will. It's held up fairly well for several years now. Stormwater Management Commission also installed porous bricks on the previous Gurney grade school site. So that was in order to provide parking for the new soccer facility there. We were able to put in a parking lot that had porous brick surface, and that's a little more common, I think, that we've seen than the porous asphalt. And it holds up, but it is more expensive. So I guess that if you have a question about applications of that, I do have more people in my office that have more experience with those and can give you kind of a cost per square foot type analysis in your certain circumstance and give you some better information on it.
Thank you. At what point is post-rainwater in the yard a problem? How long, I think this might be after looking at your yard, Mike Thomas, how long should we let it sit there? 12 hours, a day, 2 days? At what point do we think we need to start to address it?
Ryan, you might be able to answer that a little better, but in general, the requests that we receive, we do our best to say, if it can go with, leave the property within a day or less, that would be good. And there are different things. There's swales that can be installed, obviously piping as well. But typically that's what we will tell residents, that if it goes away within a day, that's good. Now that might not work well with certain plants and that type of thing, but it's typically our response.
Ryan, did you want to add anything?
I would add, most of our native plants are adapted to handle intermittent flooding quite well. It would take several weeks to really start suppressing them. But, if you have ornamentals, that one picture that I had in my slideshow of echinacea, there were fruit trees in that picture, and I have a pretty wet yard, and I haven't been able to mow my grass yet this year. It's still been too soggy. And so when I planted those fruit trees, I had to plant them in raised beds, because fruit trees don't like wet feet, so it just depends on what you're trying to do with it and what you're tolerant of.
Mike Thomas, what are the design specs, 10-year or 20-year, included in the 2014 City of Lake Forest plan? So I guess.
It actually is a 10-year. We know that we have certain areas in town that do need to be brought up to that standard. But I will say the project at Old Elm and Timber will probably in some cases be a 25 and potentially a 50. Because where that is going into that creek, we've got a storm sewer coming down Green Bay, we've got one coming down Longwood, Timber to Old Elm, we've got the storm sewer coming from Old Elm east heading west. It's all going into the same creek, and that 54-inch, what we're actually doing with that is adding storage capacity. And we're doing the same thing on Timber with the 42-inch. We're adding storage capacity. So in that circumstance where we know we've got a T into one pipe that's going into the creek, our choice is to add some capacity.
Thank you. We'll just do one more question, and this is probably a good one. If you were to start all over in planning the stormwater infrastructure, how would it be designed differently than what we have? That's a big question. Maybe since it's more all-encompassing, it should be Mike Warner.
Very good question. I think probably the most protected community in the county, I would say, looking at all 52, maybe Vernon Hills. So they started later in the 70s planning, and the stream corridor that goes through the center of town is all open space, or most of it is open space. So you have CV Ditch going through there, you have Indian Creek going through there, and those areas flood, but there are no homes there. So I guess to answer the question, I would have more of a setback from the water that's required for residential structures or any structure for that matter. If I was planning a community or planning an area to start with.
Thank you. And did anyone want to add anything there? Well, thank you to our panelists for an incredibly informative program this evening, and your slides are wonderful. I wonder if you can make those slides available maybe on the League website.
I have them, and I can put them up there with their permission.
I think you can see nods all up and down the panel, so I think we're in good shape. And thank you for all of your wonderful questions and being engaged with our topic this evening, and thank you for coming.
I'd like to thank Melanie, before you go, please. I do want to thank Melanie for her work here. Could you please stop in the back and pick up your brochures and flyers? Also, the League of Women Voters very rarely charges for any of our events, but we do most gratefully accept donations, and there is a donation jar in the back. Thank you very much for being here.